Welcome, everyone, to another Saga episode here on Heart of a Volunteer Veterans Podcast. Sit back and follow the saga of Army veteran and clinical psychologist Dr. CPT Kopp as she unpacks her life-changing experiences in not only her own service, but also in selflessly serving the soldiers and veterans of our country. Once again, welcome and enjoy the episode. All right, everybody. Hey, welcome back to another episode here on the show. You know me. I'm not going to say who it is, but you know. Hey, for today's episode, we have an amazing veteran co-host. When you look at the timeline that a lot of veterans and service members take when it comes to, joining the service and, ultimately serving, a lot of us knew early on. For me, it was the summer of 1992, right before my senior year. I decided that college was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get out there. For other folks, they knew in their life that they were going to join, but they had other things they needed to do first. Maybe they had some family obligations they needed to work out, but they ended up joining. And others, they're like, hey, I know I'm going to join, but I'm going to do the norm. I'm going to go to college and maybe get my degree and then join. But you've got other veterans that, it's not on their radar, but it ends up being a life-changing experience, not only for themselves, but for everybody around them. Today's veteran co-host is an Army veteran and a clinical psychologist with 2 combat deployments as what I call a combat psychologist. I'm very happy to have Dr. CPT Kopp, Ph.D. with us today, or as a lot of veterans and service members call her, Captain Kopp. Katie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm really excited to have our little chat this morning. First, aren't?
Yeah. Hey, we've been working, trying to get you on here. You've been kind of shuttling like all over the place, trying to get, like we'll talk about like new life settled in and everything else. And then of course with the virus and trying to get everything managed. I'm just glad that we could find the time to get on here and get your saga done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
So what's been going on and where are you exactly for the listeners?
Yeah, so I am in Iowa, in eastern Iowa, right on the Mississippi River. It's been a little crazy here the last couple of weeks, just in keeping with 2020 style. On top of a pandemic, we basically had a hurricane, which you don't usually prepare for in Iowa. So it's been, some parts of the state have been really hit hard and kind of devastated. So just people are mobilizing, like always, putting together resources, helping out their neighbors and stuff. So luckily we did not get hit here where I am. What kind of
damage did you guys have?
So again, my house, we're good. The storm the bulk of it stayed south of us, but, hundreds of acres of crops, flattened corn, yeah. Which is not that easy to do. Silos destroyed, people, trees, tons of trees down. So power lines down. We're now a few days after cities without power and power lines down and that whole thing. So all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right. Hey, now what about it as far as work for you? Are you going in every day or are you working from home? What's the deal for you and where you work at?
Yeah, so I had some time off or time for working from home, and now I'm going back into the office. But my patients are staying home, so I'm still doing telework. I work with veterans every day. That's my heart. That's who I believe I am here to serve. So that's what I do. Yeah,
a veteran's veteran. I like that. Well, hey, Katie, people are listening to the episode to listen to you. They want to hear your saga, and you have an amazing one. So let's jump into that. Let's talk about the saga of Dr. CPT Kopp.
All right. Started on a cold night in October, 1981. I don't know if it was cold. It was Iowa though. So, I was born and raised in Iowa. Pretty standard two-parent blue collar family. My dad working at a factory in John Deere here. My mom kind of on and off, staying home with us, doing some work here and there. One older brother. Really nothing too exciting, I guess, in terms of childhood. I was the good kid. Always worked really hard in school. Pretty much straight A's the whole way through for the most part. And that's kind of my jam.
Would you say, Katie, that even back then that you were? I mean, it sounds like straight A's. You were pretty driven as a student and as a young person.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I have no idea where it necessarily came from. I mean, my parents definitely modeled like hard work, but I don't remember them being like, school is the way and you got to do this, or, there wasn't a ton of pressure. We didn't get paid for grades, like none of that stuff. Because now that I'm raising kids, I'm like, how do I get my kids to do that? Like, I hope they care about school like I did. Like, I have no idea how that happened, but.
Well, I've seen some of the comments that, like the conversations you have with your kids where you put them on Facebook. And they sound like they're following your path.
They're funny kids.
They're quite witty. They're quite witty.
Yeah.
Well, hey, a lot of folks have military people in their in their background or in their local area that are kind of influence them. Did you have any of that growing up?
Nothing. Like, I did not know anybody who had served in the military. Like, my dad, kind of missed Vietnam. My grandpa missed World War II. Like, I just didn't have that in my family like a lot of people do. There's no military installations here, minus some reserve and guard stuff, but you're not exposed to that. It's not like growing up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Like, you don't know,
right.
Everybody has somebody in their military family there. But here, that's just not the case. So I was not exposed to it at all growing up. Never occurred to me that I would ever serve in the military, ever.
So when you got out of high school, you literally went out to go to college and just and get a degree. Did you know from an early age that you wanted to be a psychologist?
Pretty much. It's kind of weird because I don't know how I even knew what therapy was. I didn't have a model for that. I didn't go to therapy as a kid. Nobody in my family did either. But I would tell people, pretty early on that that's what I was going to do. I thought I would go the psychiatry route. I was pre-med. My first year went to a private school down in St. Louis as a pre-med student majoring in psychology. Mm-hmm. And then decided I was not going to go the psychiatry route, where you go to med school and specialize in psychiatry. I was going to go psychology instead. So transferred to a state school because I knew I was going to have to go to graduate school. So it didn't make a ton of sense to put a ton of money into my undergraduate, knowing I had another 5 years ahead of me.
Right.
So I transferred to a state school in Iowa, in University of Northern Iowa. Go Panthers. And in the process, picked up some credits from classes I had taken in high school, like AP and some CUP tests and stuff. So then I was a junior all of a sudden. So junior in fall of 2001 when I got to Cedar Falls, Iowa. And then,
So you just kind of screamed through that.
Yeah, blasted through undergrad, graduated in 3 years. 3 weeks after graduation from undergrad, married my high school sweetheart, who was also graduating a year early. Mm-hmm. So, and then we started on this journey together of moving around the country and doing stuff we never expected to do. So I knew at that point that I was going to go to graduate school in Southern California. I'd been accepted there into a Ph.D. program. So it's kind of strange because straight from undergrad, get accepted to the Ph.D. program. The plan is to kind of take 5 years to do that. Along the way, they give you a master's degree. Mm-hmm. Hey, good job, keep going. Right. There's really no plan that you would stop going to school after you get your master's. So, we graduated 3 weeks later, got married a month after that, moved to California, to LA County, which is a little bit of a culture shock from small town Iowa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then, kind of same thing, just stayed on that path of achieve, do what you can, go as fast as you can, push through grad school. You get a sponsor when you go to grad school, kind of like when you go to the Army, I guess. So I was assigned a student who was in her second or third year in the program to kind of mentor me in that first year. And she told me about getting a scholarship with the Army to pay for school. Mm-hmm. And so that was like first time in my life. So at that point, I'm like 21 years old. First time in my life that ever, like the Army ever came up on my radar at all.
Whoa, you're 21 years old and you're in grad school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's overachieving right there, getting after it.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what I do.
So, what did you feel about that? I mean, the first inclination, like as you looked at the scholarship and you were like, we're going to pay for it. You're going to serve. What did that mean to you then? I mean, did you think of it in the depth that you know it now, or was it just kind of like something that was kind of obscure to you, but piqued your interest?
Yeah, I mean, it piqued my interest because of the dollar signs. Like, honestly, like I wish I could be like, I've just always been like a real patriot and I thought this is how I can serve. Like, that was not it. It was like, okay, this school is really expensive. We're going to be looking at almost $100,000 in tuition by the end of all this. Cool. If I get this scholarship, which was not a guarantee at all, it was a pretty competitive program called the Health Professional Scholarship Program. Definitely recommend it for anybody who thinks they might want to serve within any of the medical fields, which covers like every medical specialty. So they have this program and if I get it, then they paid for my last 2 years of graduate school and then kind of a guaranteed like internship, which internships in psychology are also competitive. So it was like, okay, that'll give me an advantage that way too. But looking at the fine print, which has changed a little bit now, it was like 3 years of service. And at that point, it was 2004 when I started looking into it. It was spring of 2005 when I commissioned. So we were in 2 wars by then. Yeah. But it was still like, well, maybe, I could probably just do my time and, get out on like year 3, like, day 1, like just kind of get in and out of there quick, get the money and call it a day, and then obviously it evolved a lot more for me from there.
Where did you, how was your family taking all this when you told them that, coming from a non-military family, and very, no background in it, what were they thinking? It's like, are you painting this picture of like, hey, I'm going to be working in a building here in the States, no big deal. Is this what you were thinking and kind of the way they were going along with it?
Yeah. I probably thought maybe there's like a 50% chance I would deploy. I probably gave them the impression there was like 5% chance I would deploy.
Oh, no.
But I remember it being, at this point, like I'm married, I'm living on my own, but you still like, still talk to your parents, right? And they still like advise you and that kind of thing. So I remember coming home probably like a Christmas break, that second year of grad school and being like, hey, thinking about doing this, and it was like a sit down at the kitchen table, have a talk kind of thing. And that I'm sure that was first question, are you going to have to deploy? Oh, no, it'll be fine.
Yeah. How did it all start? You talked about, grad school and then you got the internship. How did that go in terms of like preparing you for, what you were going to be experiencing?
Well, so it's interesting because I commissioned in 2005 after receiving the scholarship. I didn't really do anything for like 2 years. They were giving me some money, they were paying my tuition, reimbursing for books, all that good stuff. But, to say I was in the Army at that point would have felt like misrepresentation. Right. And then the August 2008 is when I went to Fort Sam Houston to my officer basic course with a bunch of other medical service officers. So we had, dentists and optometrists and physical therapists, and it's kind of all of us, mixed up together. I think we had like 7 weeks of our initial training where they're trying to teach us some Army stuff. They like went through the gas chamber and did some short field time and learned about land navigation and like, I'm going to shoot an azimuth. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to do it. And I was somebody who had never touched a firearm. I didn't even go camping, So when they're like, we're going to do an FTX, I'm like, what? We got to pack bags and sleep in tents. This is bullshit.
How was it when you first, you first handled a firearm? What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was like mildly terrifying, I would say. I just didn't want to like screw something up. And I think for me, it was just like the responsibility of having live ammunition was like, oh, okay, this is for real. We're just gonna like muzzle discipline, right? Like just point it down range, and then even if something terrible happens, at least it's not going to be that bad. So
what I found,
so
like before I joined, I'd handled firearms and shot before, and we had our rifles for a long time before we actually went to the range, so it felt like you knew this thing. It had been hanging on my bunk there at Paris Island, every night, taking it out every day and drilling with it and everything. But as soon as they said, if you have a negligent discharge, an accidental discharge, you will be out of here. All of a sudden, I didn't know what this was. And I think that's their way of taking you down to zero and rebuilding you with that stress of it. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
I don't think they handle medical officers in the same way. Our basic training was nothing compared to what, line soldiers go through.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're teaching you there how to, salute, march, basic leadership skills, building the team, things like that.
Yeah. And it's an interesting mix, because like my first day at OBC, like I was a captain, and in a lot of other places, a lot of people make assumptions about if you're a captain, you've got all this other time in service. But for anybody with a doctorate level training, we come in as captains. It's almost like crediting your time in school towards your time in service, because that is the service you're providing to the military, is doing that job, So I'm a captain, a bunch of, all my friends there are also captains. And then our class, thankfully, had some like pretty squared away second lieutenants,
right.
Which might be the only time anybody's ever used that phrase, like second lieutenants.
Now you're talking about the ones that were active duty before that.
So, yeah, some of them were prior service, so prior enlisted who got commissioned and came in as medical service corps officers, 70 Bravos, like planning medical missions, that kind of stuff. And then the rest of them were nurses who had been through ROTC.
Right.
So that's one of the only ROTC programs where you know what your job's going to be going into it because you're in nursing school. So you're planning to join the Army as a nurse. So they all at least had some of those basic like customs and courtesies and stuff down, and then trying to square away the rest of us captains and higher. We had majors, we had lieutenant colonel. Like it was bananas.
Well, I know you were saying you had like a lieutenant colonel, and he was an older gentleman, and he was just like, "Hey, I need to serve," and he just jumped in there. Yeah,
I think he got all the waivers to come into the Army like in his 50s, but had this 30-year career or something as like an oral surgeon, and so then they let him in and came in the Army.
I think with those specialties, especially the medical field, if you do get somebody that's a little bit older, even the chaplain corps, if you got a 55-year-old chaplain, but he or she is rocking and rolling, and they can benefit the spirituality of the unit.
Yeah,
bring them in there.
Yeah,
and I think the same way when it comes to to the medical and the dental, it's a good deal. If somebody from the civilian sector wants to come and give their skills, we've done a good job of taking them. Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So all right. So now you're doing soldiering stuff there for 9 weeks, and then you turn around and hit up Fort Lewis, and that's where your internship was, right?
Yep. So psychologists do an internship before they graduate. So I had to get through, so technically I was still a student at my university in California, but I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. And we had a cohort of 4 of us, I think. So 3 other interns as well, going through our rotations throughout the year. And still like 90% of what we're doing is focused on becoming a really good psychologist.
Right.
And not as much being a military officer. I mean, I'm working in the hospital. I'm wearing my uniform every day, but it did not necessarily feel like, oh yeah, I'm in the Army. It's like, okay, yeah, I gotta go through a gate to get to work. But otherwise, like I'm just walking into the hospital. Being a captain, it's not special in the hospital because every other medical officer there probably outranks you. You might as well be a PFC walking around as an 003 in a hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
So after your year there, what I mean, for me, I'm thinking like that's kind of it, right? It's like you've done your internship and now it's time to get on orders and get in the fight. Is there something else that has to happen that on the professional side of that?
Oh man, there was so much going on. Like that was a very stressful 12-month period because to graduate, so like I said, I'm still a student. I had to successfully complete internship, which didn't feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like most people, do good work, you pass internship. But I had to defend my dissertation. So I was still finishing up like data collection. I'm writing up, research results, statistics, like all that kind of stuff. Emailing back and forth with my dissertation committee, who's all in California. I want to say it was like February of that year that I flew down there to defend it, in front of the committee and presenting my results. That's the whole thing. And then you got to take the licensing exam, which is also like very stressful. No guarantees there. The pass rate somewhere around 60 or 70%. So, again, I'd always been a pretty good student. I wasn't like super concerned about it, but it was not like guaranteed at all. And part of that too was that I had decided, in my standard nature of trying to fast track everything, that I was going to get licensed really quickly and go to a line unit. By the time I was finishing internship, we kind of knew like we weren't going to get assigned to a hospital, like we were probably going to be embedded with the real Army, as we would say. So I had talked to my branch manager and there was this assignment in Colorado, but they were getting ready to deploy. And so I had to be licensed quickly in order to go with them. Because at this point, you got to be licensed before you can deploy. Mm-hmm. And so everything just like was so fast. Like everybody else in my cohort took an extra year to do more, supervised hours as a postdoctoral resident. So at this point, you've graduated. Now you're postdoctoral, but you're going to get more supervised hours. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. So I got licensed in the state of Alabama, which didn't require any postdoc hours. Passed my exam. And at that point, like everyone, I didn't know this necessarily, but this brigade in Colorado was getting ready to gear up for what they knew was going to be a hard deployment. So they wanted to have an embedded mental health, behavioral health asset. So I contacted the division psychiatrist when I got my results. And I was like, because it wasn't instantaneous. I took the exam and it took like 3 weeks to get my results. And so I finally got my results. I emailed the division psychiatrist and I was like, hey, great news. I passed my test. And he then like forwards it immediately to the brigade leadership. And within like 3 or 4 hours, it like cycles back to me and he's like, they're excited to have you. And it was, at that point, Colonel George being like, great news, get the psych down here. So I had orders cut for the next month in February. February 2009 is when I reported to Fort Carson.
To Mountain Warriors.
Yeah, 4th Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division. I feel kind of old now because I'm like, that unit doesn't even exist anymore. Right. Back in my day, we were Mountain Warriors.
Mountain Warriors.
Yeah.
What did you think about that? That whole process of being welcomed in to the brigade. What did you think about that?
It was interesting because, like I said, so they realized the importance at this point. 2009, 8 years into Afghanistan war, 6 years into Iraq war, like starting to appreciate behavioral health a little bit more and the need for that embedded support. At the same time, there was still a lot of tension from some people who thought that we were going to take away from the force, that we were only there to like find people, welcome them with open arms and put them on profile. Like that's what they thought we were going to do, So my first introduction to the whole brigade leadership, like all at once, it feels like it was the first day I set foot on post. That might be a little dramatic, but like met the brigade surgeon and he was like, "Hey, perfect. There's a command and staff today. Like, let's go." And so, oh, by the way, take off your AMED patch. Here's a 4ID one. Put that on. Like, got my shoulder patch somewhere, belong to the unit now. And he took me to command and staff, and it had already started. It was in this tiny conference room, in the brigade headquarters, the old one on Barclay there at Fort Carson. So
the old banana belt. Yeah,
we walk in there in this tiny conference room and kind of sneak in the back, sit down. They're all seated around the U-shaped table for the cool guys, and I was sitting in the back. And then he's, it's like time for him to give his brief or whatever. And he's like, "Oh, I just want to make sure you all get introduced. We have our brigade psychologist, Captain CPT Kopp." And like every like head in the room like turned to me like, "Oh, this is it," And so I'm flush, bright red, I'm sure. And one of the battalion commanders had some smart ass thing to say about like, "Well, just tell me, can you say the word deployable?" Again, just communicating like, okay, like you're just here to put people on profile, so don't do that,
Right.
And then at the same time, like, so I'm working hand in hand with people who belong to the hospital, and that's the weird part about being an embedded asset. I'm credentialed through the hospital there at Fort Carson. All of my coworkers in my office belong to the hospital, all the other social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, all those people. So we're all now trying to get this brigade ready to go out the door and figuring out numbers and how many people are going to be allowed to get on planes, because it was definitely an all hands on deck situation in 2009.
Right.
And the hospital staff was not necessarily accustomed to being ready to make those decisions at all times. Like, is a soldier deployable or not? So I've got brigade, some people, again, selectively in the brigade pressuring me, like, you better make sure all these soldiers are deployable. And then I've got hospital staff being like, "Watch out for this Captain Kopp. Like, she's just trying to get every soldier on the plane." I was like, "No, I just want you to make decisions. Like, you're already treating this person. I just need you to tell me whether or not they can get on a plane." But, we worked it all out. And then we all did get on planes in June that year, May, June, I think we started leaving, and went to Afghanistan.
Where did you, what part of Afghanistan did you go to?
We're in RC East, N2KL, we called it, but for our provinces. My home fob was Fob Fenty in Jalalabad. And so that was my home base for that year. At that point, the brigade, I was the only asset for the brigade at the provider level. So I had a mental health tech as well, enlisted tech, a 68 X-ray. But I was the only officer assigned for mental health, for behavioral health for the brigade. So then we had some Air Force people in our AO who would kind of supplement, and they were on shorter rotations. They did 6-month deployments. So with the timing of their rotations and our deployment, I ended up with 3 different people that were with me, psychiatrists that were with me in Jalalabad during my year there.
Can we talk about that for just a moment, as far as like, your idea of continuity? Having been in, we're going to talk about the 2 deployments that you went on with the brigade, and that continuity that you had with the team itself and the soldiers and leaders. Do you think the 6-month, because like Major Johnson came out there to the Ganjgal for us.
Yeah.
And then of course before that it was somebody different. And, and the kind of the pickup between both of those was our chaplain, right? Chaplain would come out and visit with us and kind of pick up some of that slack. Do you think that's a better system of doing the 6-month for the therapist, or the year-long embedded for the team itself?
I mean, the combination of the 2 worked well for us. It's one of those things like we gave them endless amounts of shit about their short deployments and their nicer housing and greener grass than we have. But, they came out and got embedded with us. So much respect to them, despite all of the crap we gave them. But it did, I think I think the units definitely need assigned assets. But you're probably not going to get, so at that point we ended up with, in our whole brigade AO, 3, therapists and a psychiatrist. And I think it's going to be a long time before the Army evolves to have that level of assigned strength. So having these assets added to us was like the best solution at the time. So right. I think it went really well.
I definitely like the multiple layers of mental health that we had. We had the ability to, from the Ganjgal, we were sending, 1 or 2 soldiers a week back to Blessing. And you remember Colonel Pearl put together that decompression site there. Right. And we'd send them back there. And of course, Major Johnson was right there. You got, your chaplain, and those veterans get a chance to kind of cycle through there, get a chance to kind of visit, relax. And that worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, hey, so you are a young captain. How old are you right now in Afghanistan?
28, I think, in 2009. I would have turned 28 that year.
And what are you doing? How are you getting around? Are you just staying at Fenty and people are coming to see you, or is this like you have to kind of travel around like leadership do?
Right. So there was that one section of the AO that we had an Air Force asset there because it was just a harder place to fly to because of how hot it was. And so he covered that area. And then we had another Air Force asset that covered another kind of slice of it. But otherwise, I had about 12 locations that I was driving to, flying to. So I was rarely in Jalalabad for more than 2 days at a time.
Oh.
I would do kind of some like bouncing. So I might, there's like maybe 3 FOBs that are, next to each other in terms of like kind of being down the road from each other. So I might fly to one, be there 24 hours, next day fly to another one, be there 24 hours, next day another one, 24 hours, and then go back to Jeff and like do my laundry and, whatever, and then do the whole thing again. I mean, there was always like, here's what I think my week is going to look like, and then let's see what happens. Because I was also the one to flex when, hey, this bad thing just happened. This group of soldiers is going to need your attention. So I tried to be there for the memorial, and then meet with the soldiers affected with about 48 hours after the fact. So anytime someone was, seriously wounded to the point they were medevac to a theater, anytime we had a KIA, which unfortunately happened a lot that year, that first deployment, then I would respond to that. So it was, you have your plans, but you're ready for I go.
So you were traveling around with the Canadians, the Molson Air.
Yeah.
Just grabbing your rucksack, your pistol and rifle, jumping on a bird, traveling around the country. And
that was so bizarre in retrospect. Like, these civilian unarmed Canadian aircraft that were taking us around. And they were, heroes of the battle, in my opinion. Like, they moved a ton of assets around that AO. So that was the case most of the time. Probably 80% of my travel was on Molson Air. And then I would take some military aircraft if I needed to, or if I was going to tag along with the brigade commander if he was going somewhere. And then every once in a while I would convoy as well in that first deployment. Second deployment, very rare for me to convoy. And the first deployment was a little more common, but still not a ton of ground movement, just for efficiency more than anything else. And then it would make my leaders a little concerned, I think, if I was spending a lot of time on the road, and not that I'm delicate or that my life is more important than anybody else who was out there, but I was, one of one for the brigade who did what I did.
Right.
And so they just needed me to stay safe and to keep moving, and not to spend, 13 hours on the road getting to one place and then maybe get stuck there waiting for military aircraft until there was a low loom cycle. And then, now I'm at this really small top with 40 soldiers for 5 days, whereas I've got all these other hundreds of soldiers in other places I needed to get to.
What was your favorite place to go to?
Ooh, that's hard because some of it depends on, who was there, right? Like some people were fun to hang out with. And so Monty was probably a favorite in 2009. And I kind of feel bad saying that because it wasn't our guys at the time. It was 10th Mountain guys. Mm-hmm. But they were fun to hang out with. They take me out shooting. They had a great cook. Like they had this amazing cook at Kopp Monty. So he was like, go get some good food. Asadabad had really good food, so we'd go there sometimes too. But they didn't have a lot of warfighters in Asadabad. Like they had a lot of I shouldn't say they didn't have warfighters. They did. They had special forces troops who I was not providing services to. They didn't want me there. But then they had some Air Force people. They had a PRT, but they didn't have a ton of like infantry. So we did not have a lot of soldiers there. So I didn't go to ABAD very often. But between those two, those were probably some of my favorites.
What sticks out the most during that first deployment?
Oh man, there was some. I mean, like I said, the level of intensity we knew going into it. I guess, like Kunar Province is where terrible things happen in Afghanistan. Like it already had a reputation by that point, and then that was where we were. So we kind of knew there was going to be some stuff, but just in the first 4 months. I mean, I attended probably 10 memorial services, including we responded or provided support in the wake of the Battle of Ganjgal, where 3 Marines and a Navy corpsman were killed in a valley that resulted in 2 Medal of Honors being awarded.
Swanson and Meyer.
Yeah, Captain Will Swenson, Dakota Meyer, the Marine. So, and then the 10th Mountain guys were going to Barge Matal, way the hell up north, for reasons unknown. And it was a terrible place. And there was a lot of trauma that occurred there. And so, and again, just I felt very fortunate. 10th Mountain, really embraced me, and really saw the value. Their battalion commander, O'Donnell, I think his name was awesome guy. And really made sure that I was there when those guys got back from those rotations, kind of debriefed each platoon. So I'm doing that September time frame between Barge Matal and Ganjgal, same time. And then October 3rd hits 2009, which now has become quite infamous for the Battle of Keating. Mm-hmm. And those were our guys, 4ID guys from 361 Cav, where they had this day-long battle of 40 U.S. versus 300 to 400 Taliban, enemy inside the wire. Again, 2 Medal of Honors awarded from that battle, but we lost 8 soldiers, and so that was a really rough one. Oh, yeah. And required a lot of behavioral health support for those guys after the fact.
I can't imagine, Katie, going, I can imagine being in those situations, right? Because they've happened. But I can't imagine helping people through the aftermath. That's just, I remember Iraq and and losing soldiers, and then even there in the Korangal, it's just trying to get the unit back up so it can operate to the closest semblance that it can of before it happened, and how hard that is to put it, basically put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Mm-hmm.
And it was a weird mission where we were also, it's okay, we need to help them process this kind of stuff, and we need to prepare them to stay in theater for another 8 months.
Right.
People kind of act oh yeah, you deployed and then there was Keating. It's yeah, that was in October. I was there until June of the next year. We still had a lot of war to fight. Right. And that wasn't necessarily something that I guess I felt prepared for in my training of helping people with ongoing trauma, and it's prepared me now a little bit. I think when it comes to working with first responders, if I'm seeing a firefighter and he was like, oh yeah, like we've had all these terrible things happen. It's like, you don't necessarily want to be like, all right, let's do this. Let's open it all out. Let's clean out all these old wounds. Cause like you can't necessarily do that when it's still ongoing, like maybe that's something you do when they retire. Like, okay, now let's really unpack all this stuff. But like, this is a job you're going to respond to another call tomorrow. Like I can't have you falling apart because, we're opening up all this stuff that you've been through.
So at that point, is it kind of tough love, in a sense of, with that dynamic being in play? It's not like we're back at Carson, where you can, hey, go ahead and take 2 weeks of leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, everybody's got the fight left in front of them, and soldiers to the left, to their right that need their their rifle to protect them. So,
right.
Crazy.
I mean, I didn't feel like I needed to lie to anybody about like how tough or strong they are. Like these guys were resilient, like I wasn't bullshitting them. I was just reminding them like, you can do this. You are here fighting for each other. You have now seen the ultimate examples of what that means, to be willing to put your life on the line. I sure hope you're not going to be in anything resembling that again. But if it does, like you're ready, and again, that like you've mentioned, the chaplain support, especially after Kopp Keating, 361 chaplain Matt Weathers, who had a degree in counseling as well. Mm-hmm. He was very, very prepared to assist with that mission. And he, the chaplains always have more access to these guys than we do. Because they live there. They're also like embedded in just that battalion, whereas I'm going to take care of a brigade,
Mm-hmm. How was the rest of the deployment? I mean, there's always games being played. Mm-hmm. There's always great conversations. I enjoyed, a great cigar in the evenings when I survived the day and the unit was safe. I'd always like to get a cigar to kind of commemorate that. What'd you all have there in your locations you were traveling around? Yeah,
I smoked my first cigar of my life in Afghanistan. I've never smoked one outside of Afghanistan, as a matter of fact. But we had, like I said, some great people in Jalalabad. Some of the docs, just people that I felt like those were my therapists in a way, And we'd play cards, watch movies, smoke cigars. I mean, you can't. You don't laugh as hard anywhere else as you do when like the world is crazy around you. There's just something about the chance to like relax that you just lean into it, So I always had those guys and I really appreciated that. The rest of the year, like I said, I mean, I don't want to act like Keating was the end of the deployment because there's a lot of other things that happened, but it is kind of a blur. I went on R&R in January, which now, deployments are shorter and there isn't R&R, and I don't know. There's probably not a great way to do it. Do you want to be away from your family for a long, long stretch, or do you want to break it up in the middle? Again, I was married, but it was just us. We didn't have any kids or anything. So at least I didn't have that stress of like disrupting the household routine of like, oh, he's taking care of the kids and now I'm going to come in and do that. Like we didn't have that. It was just the dog. She was fine. Right. She'd still let me walk her,
What, real quick, what'd you do on mid-tour?
I think we went back to Iowa. Like, I think we had a week and I flew back to Colorado and then we had a week to go to Iowa to see family and then back to Colorado. Like we didn't do anything super exciting that should have in retrospect. The Army will fly you anywhere in the world. Right. And I went to Iowa.
What did your family say to you at this point? I mean, Keating's happened. They know that you're there. Ganjgal has happened. They know you were there. It's all over the news. What are they saying to you? What kind of hugs are you getting?
Yeah, I mean, big hugs. I would always downplay the amount of danger that I was in. And some of that, like, is real. Like, I wouldn't say, like, oh, yeah, that's really close calls. I had some times when things happened that I was in the vicinity of. I don't feel like, that's my alive day, or, I don't have any of that. But yeah, I was on convoys that got shot at. I was on fobs and cops that got mortared. Like that did happen. And I was not talking about that with them. I would downplay that for sure. But I don't think anybody was asking a lot of questions either. I'm sure my mom did not want to know the answer to that at the time, because I was going back, like
Right.
Everybody knows in R&R, like you're going back in 2 weeks. So it's not like,
Let's keep it happy and upbeat.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So, hey, you finish up your first deployment. What is your time looking like? I mean, as far as, your obligation time to the service, what is that looking like now?
Yeah, so I had, an ADSO, an active duty service obligation, as a result of signing my contract for the scholarship. And like I said, it was probably 4 years total. I think it was probably supposed to be 3 years after internship. But I'm getting to the end of that. So, and then, with officers, you don't have an ETS date. You don't have, you have your minimum date you have to serve, but it's not like, okay, and here's the day you get out, unless you tell us you want to stay in. You stay in until, you get kicked out, or you tell them, I would like to, resign my commission. Mm-hmm. So I was at the end of that obligation. And again, going into this whole thing, right, I'm like, I'll do my 3 years, max. I will get out the day that I can. I may or may not deploy. This is my attitude going into my military contract. Well, now, I've got a combat deployment under my belt. I'm at the end of my obligation, and I just felt very much a part of the unit. It was very important to me, be a mountain warrior. I was really proud of the things that we had done. And so I wanted to stay. We knew we were going back. The cycles, whatever, had been discussed, and we were going to go through a training cycle, and we were going back to Afghanistan. And that was pretty much projected almost as soon as we got back to Fort Carson. And so there were some hard conversations
right.
that were had with people in my life who did not want me to be in the Army anymore. But I just felt like I needed to be there. And I was not willing to get out at that point. So I stayed and went through the training cycle again. And that now I've got all this longevity, because a lot of the soldiers were not leaving. I mean, of course, some people are ETSing and PCSing and stuff, but you have a bunch of people who feel the same way I do. This is a badass unit doing some cool stuff in some hard places, and I want to be a part of that, you know? So people are sticking around. And so now there's a lot of people that I know for a long time, and we're all going, we're going to deploy again, So there were, like I said, there were some hard moments in between there. And I know your quality of life in the Army can be so significantly impacted by the people around you and by your leadership. Like I said, I have no complaints at all. My two brigade commanders I spent the bulk of time under, Randy George and James Mangus, I have so much respect for the two of them. And I think it was really mutual. I felt very supported by them. I felt like they gave me a lot of respect. They gave me the decision-making power that I needed to help soldiers effectively. I struggled a little bit more with my immediate leadership. And so we're gearing up to deploy, but now we're in October 2011. We're at JRTC, and I was miserable. I was so unhappy, and just kind of questioning that. I was like, okay, I've put some things on the line to make this decision to stay in the Army. And now I'm having all these problems with my leaders. And then, one of my best friends, Captain Shu, Robert Schonenberger, people who know him from 212, he had this massive stroke at JRTC. Yeah. So, we're fighting our pretend war. And then this real life trauma happens. And devastating, life-changing. I thought we were going to lose him. And people knew that we were close because we'd been together already. He was one of the guys that was in the 2009 deployment too. So I've known him now for 2 years. And so the brigade commander and our new brigade sergeant major, Kevin Griffin, they commissioned a private flight to go to Shreveport to see Shu. And they're like, hey, his wife's going to be there. We think she's going to be upset. Why don't you come with us?
Right.
So you can see your friend and you can talk to her. So they rescue me from the pre-po yard at Fort Polk. And I get on a helicopter with them and go to the hospital. And it was devastating. And like I said, everything was just this sucks. Everything about this sucks. And so we had to get through that rotation and get back to Carson and still gear up to go to Afghanistan again.
Hey, talking about Command Sergeant Major Griffin, how did he smooth things over for you, making things kind of back to the way they were on the first deployment? Him and Colonel Mingus.
Yeah, so like you said, they're both, had so much experience and just really cared very deeply about soldiers. And maybe people think oh, that's how it always is. And I assure you, it is not. They did. And they had the street cred to back it up, they had been to bad places and come out ahead. So, yeah. So, I'm trying to think exactly what his influence was. We kind of butt heads a little bit because we had different ideas about how you take care of soldiers, but both coming from the same place and just maybe having different methods of things. So, but one of the things they did that second deployment is they let me push forward. So I moved up to Kunar Province. I did not want to be in Jalalabad again. I was having those stupid, petty arguments with my leadership at the time at the company level. And so I was like, get me out of here. So I went up to Fob Joyce, where 212 was headquartered. And then I really focused my efforts, like I said, in Kunar, where 212 and 112 were operating, kind of headquartered at Joyce and Bostic, and then still had some of the smaller cops that I would visit as well. So moving around that AO, and they supported me in that and letting me go forward.
What about that second deployment, Katie? What I know what sticks out there, but can you talk about encapsulate that deployment?
Yeah, so it was not quite as kinetic as when we were there 2009, 2010. But still plenty of things going on. Still I'm doing my thing. I'm flying around. I'm going to all these I'm going to the same, outposts and things that I did the first time. So it was a little my mind would mess with me sometimes. Who's there again? Which unit is that? With 112 being at Bostic, I'm but that's 361. But now 361 is in this other place. And so, so some familiar places and, still flying Wilson Air, doing a little more military air, doing that kind of thing. And then it leads up to, August of 2012. And I think I had just been in Jalalabad, actually. I was at Kopp Monty that morning. Again, a throwback to one of my favorite places. At this point, it's a 112 outpost, so I'm there hanging out with the PA. And you just kind of get word, some shit's going down. All right, what happened? So I get a hold of somebody at MedOps in Fob Funty, and they said there was a big explosion. Brigade commander was there. And I'm just shit, what does this mean? And it turns out a lot of very, very important people had flown to a small COP. They were going to walk to the governor's compound. And on their foot patrol, they got hit by a suicide bomber. Right. And the end result of that, is that Air Force major, Army major, and a USAID representative, and then our Brigade Sergeant Major were killed that day. And some of my good friends were hurt, and it was devastating for a lot of people. Just ripples through the brigade for that to happen.
Yeah, that was. I remember that day. I saw Command Sergeant Major Griffin a couple of days before in his office, and he was basically trying to line out my future as a senior NCO. He said, "When you come back from visiting your mortars, come and see me." And of course, when I came back, he was gone.
Yeah, we had a fairly heated discussion. The night before, about some soldiers had been photographed wearing baseball caps, and he was so mad. And that was one of the things we talked about. Don't you think it's important to let them, relax a little bit? They were at the worst place in the AO. They don't have the amenities we do in these other places, and he just saw a straight line between letting soldiers get away with a little bit and then complete loss of discipline and people were going to get killed, And so, again, it was coming from the place deep inside his heart where he wanted to protect everybody.
Right.
But he was seen as a hard ass in that way. So,
you know what? I I had the same discussion with him, and I came away with basically the way of thinking, which was the same as his. If you let standards fall a little bit, it hurts discipline in a big way. But if you can maintain standards at that high level, those small little dips, they don't affect things as bad. And we just always tried to keep the hammer down, as much as we could, and it seemed to work in the sense of redeployment, what I mean, and discipline during.
Yeah. So, so that happened, and it was devastating. It's kind of like I said, I'm not like he's my best friend or anything, but like I really respected him. I knew him, and then he was gone. And that was really the first time of everybody that we had lost where it felt more personal for me. I'm not just now a psychologist responding to a group of soldiers who are dealing with this. I am dealing with this. And I'm going to respond to this and help soldiers who are dealing with this, So like I said, I'm at Monty. I don't know what to do. There's like basically 4 different groups of people who probably need some behavioral health support because of all the different people that had been on this role. I didn't know what to do, so I went back to Jalalabad, talked to my friend, the social worker, Captain Hare, who was there, my compatriot, for my own health. Talked to Colonel Mingus because I cared about him. I wanted to make sure he was okay. He was on the patrol and he just lost his battle buddy. So,
right.
Yeah.
Very tough. Very tough. Deployments are tough. It's tough over here for me to talk about this. It always is when I'm connected to that level. But after the deployment, what are you thinking after this? Is it time to go? Are you going to stay for another round? Go to another post? Try another version of the Army? What's your plan?
Yeah, so like I said, there had been some hard discussions going into that deployment about voluntarily, staying and doing another rotation. And part of the resolution of those discussions was that I would, plan to get out when I got back. Mm-hmm. Didn't know exactly what that was going to look like and what the timeline would be. Also planned to start a family when I got back. So the way the brigade did redeployment, because there was, the 2 behavioral health officers with the brigade, now me and Captain Hare, they decided to have me come back on main body 1 with the intent that I would then greet every flight as they got back. We had the site out at the airport, the ADAG. And so I was at the ADAG for every flight. Like, I don't know. They seem to think that people would like have a breakdown in the airport. That never happened, but it was helpful to be there. It was, I was a familiar face for a lot of people. And so that's what I did. And then we joked about, we're calling it like Operation Genesis. We're going to write an op board, making a baby when we get back. And that happened. We executed that plan perfectly. So I was pregnant like before main body 5 got back.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a lot of miss you. That's a lot of miss you time. Yeah, good deal.
Yeah. So then that really like, okay, well now we know, here's about when the baby is going to come. It made sense to stay on active duty to have this kid. I've got healthcare, I've got maternity leave. Let's take advantage of all of that. And so I projected all of that out, and then out of the Army after did maternity leave, came back and out processed, and then was on terminal leave for the rest of the year. Got out at the end of 2013.
How was your transition? I mean, you're now you and your husband have a baby. Mm-hmm. You've got all these 2 combat experiences under your belt. Mm-hmm. How is your transition on a personal level?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I think I've always said transition was as easy as it gets, smooth as silk. And then in talking to you about this and kind of preparing to have this episode and stuff, I'm like, well, it is interesting because on the professional side, it really was very smooth. Like I was going to work at the hospital that was already credentialed at, that, had employed me essentially while I was in the Army. I was going to just transition into a civilian job there. So that was easy enough. It took a little longer. The hiring process is just stupid slow. So I did end up being unemployed for like 6 months. But that was fine. I had a new baby. Like I was hanging out with her, it wasn't like devastating. We were financially okay. I just got back from Afghanistan. We got savings up the wazoo, right? Like it's all good. So that part was fine. But in looking at it, I think I really was kind of like taking these baby steps away from the Army, because when I left active duty, I went into the reserves for a year, the Combat Operational Stress Control Unit. I honestly rarely even mention the fact that happened because it was so meaningless to me. It just it was not great. We didn't do really any work. I would start my drill weekend and then count down the minutes until my drill weekend was over. And I did not feel like I did anything helpful for myself, soldiers, or the Army. So that just wasn't great for me.
Did you feel like in the reserves that the volume was just turned down on the mission that you're used to performing?
Yeah, I think so. And we just weren't being put in a position to help anybody, so the whole unit exists to deploy and support. But we weren't doing that. And I was not going to deploy again. I had a newborn and then I was pregnant again. So that happened in that year.
Fertile myrtle there.
Yeah, I know. But we waited a long time to get started and then got the job done. So anyway, so then I started my civilian position. So that's kind of like baby step one, go into the reserves, do a civilian position at Fort Carson. So I'm still very much feeling part of the mission, supporting soldiers, kind of to some extent mentoring some of the behavioral health officers that were with the unit.
Right.
I asked to not be on the team that supported 4th Brigade. I felt like I needed that clean break. Those BHOs needed to not have me around. So I did not want to go there, but I ended up supporting another brigade on the installation, but it was good. So I still felt kind of part of that. And then, stayed that course for a couple of years. And then just almost a year ago now, left Colorado and got this job in Iowa, which was a no-brainer as far as you're raising kids. My husband and I are both from here. Our parents are here. Our siblings are here. This is where all of our support is. So it was an easy decision in that regard, but it really felt like now I'm leaving the Army. Now I'm leaving these people, these places, even the 8-1 Memorial. I would go there annually, at least on Memorial Day, sometimes on other anniversaries, to have that peaceful place to be solemn and pay my respects. And so now I'm just not going to have that, So it's still it's weird to be a veteran in a place where there aren't any other military. Again, you live in a place like Colorado Springs, you're a military veteran, you're not special. Half the people who live there are military veterans. And then I come here and there's not as many military veterans. And so it seems like a big deal. And that's kind of weird for me still. Try to get used to.
How's your time there and your job, working with veterans and having that rapport with them?
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine, going into a therapist's office. Of course, I've gone and sat down with you and talked about, hey, I've got a soldier that needs to come and see you. These are some of the issues. But sitting down with somebody that's been through, the same kind of scenarios you've been through, how did that feel for you? And then, are you getting good turns off of that?
Yeah, it's maybe 50-50. I don't know. Some of them don't seem to care all that much. I also have huge range, right? So I've got Vietnam veterans and I've got OIF, OEF veterans, and I have one World War II veteran that I've sat down and talked to, which is amazing, but so some of them I don't think care as much. Probably for some of the younger veterans, it maybe matters a little bit more. I have had more than a handful say, I will talk to you because you are a veteran, So I'm okay, cool. I think sometimes that's a little bit of, sometimes it's an excuse that veterans will use not to talk to a therapist. You haven't been there, so you don't know,
Right.
And so anybody who's listening, don't use that as an excuse. Civilians who've never served can still be helpful to you if you tell them your story and give them the chance. At the same time, like I am glad that that is, one easy way for me to establish rapport. I've got some stuff around my office, which now nobody can see because we're just like on Zoom calls.
Right.
And in other ways, yeah, it helps. I appreciate it.
I think if you wore your soup sandwich T-shirt during your Zooms, they would see it and be like, yeah, this is going to be a good session.
I do, it's so funny, like some of the stuff, because again, when you're a civilian at Fort Carson, everybody there still speaks Army, and so now is the first time really as an adult that I've worked in a place that's not military. I mean, it is military, but most of my coworkers have not served. Right. And so I will still say things and I'm like, is that just an Army? Like, don't people know this? So soup sandwich is one that just came up this week. I said something to one of my coworkers. I was like, are you tracking this? And she gave me this look, what does that mean? And I was like, that was when I legitimately thought, I'm like, doesn't everybody say this? And apparently they did not.
Right.
She did not know what I meant. I was like, yeah, it's almost, 16:30, I'm going to pop smoke. And someone looks at me like, what? I was like, you should all do that too. Pop smoke, get out of here.
Right. I love using the military terms and little catchphrases.
Yeah.
I still use pow pow hot chow. It just, it's all Ranger School thing. Makes me feel good. Warms me up on the inside.
I think they can tell even in the intake, just when you're asking questions about people's military service, there's just, I can't even think of an example now, but there's just phrases I use or, yeah. And, or even, when I get the Air Force guys or something, I had one last week who is a JTAC, and I told them, I was like, I was ready to give you shit about being in the Air Force. I'm like, but JTAC saved our asses a couple of times. So I'll give you some respect. And he laughed about that,
yeah.
So.
No, Katie, I just, I know how I get when I'm around veterans. And I can just imagine how a veteran feels when they walk in, to your office and you break it down like that. It's like, oh, JTAC, huh? It wasn't you, but I just wanted to say thank you for your brothers and sisters and the work they do. And for them to be like, what? Yeah, I was there. And I don't know, it's like a door opener. You know what I mean? It's a door opener. I wanted to ask in terms of going to therapy, right? Seeking counseling, finding a good mentor, a good sounding board. After these 2 tough deployments, what was your game plan and what did you go through?
Yeah, so I had been in therapy before. It was actually part of our training in my graduate program. And you have to go to therapy to become a therapist, which I think is a great standard. And I wish that all programs did that because it does blow my mind a little bit when I'll talk to a fellow professional and they're like, oh, going to therapy? I'm like, why would you have this attitude about it? Are you not going to therapy? What's wrong with you?
Right.
So I had a few over the years and I had been out of therapy for a little while. And then right when I got back from the 2012 deployment, I did go. Just to unpack, the luggage a little bit, with both deployments. I had not done any therapy in between. So I think it was important to do that, to get ready for my transition out of service. Then I got, transition into motherhood. So just a lot of things happening all at once.
Right. No, I would like for you to come on again and just so maybe we can do an episode and talk about, the importance of therapy. We just talked about having you as a therapist, right? Having another military member certified, licensed, to help you. But what about those veterans that don't have that sweet connection, right? That level of influence that is similar to them. Maybe we can talk about that selection process and how to find a therapist that jives and vibes with you. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to help people out in that process. Yeah, we'll do that. So, what about your civilian life now? I know we're in the coronavirus and there's not a lot of enjoyment out here, but what are you doing these days? to keep yourself centered and just keep moving forward, you and your family?
Yeah, it has been a little challenging. I mean, we moved in September last year, and then you kind of go into the Iowa winter being like, all right, springtime is when we get connected. We find a softball league. We find a church, like make friends. And then that didn't pan out exactly. So we do have our families here. We're seeing our parents regularly. I wouldn't say I don't feel like I have a ton of leisure activities right now. I did use my GI Bill, which feels a little weird when you're like already a doctor and people are like, you're going to school? Like, what are you doing? So I got another master's degree, trying to further my professional development. And I'm still in the process of studying for the licensing exam that comes along with that. So still kind of focused on that. I don't know, watch a lot of Netflix. What else do people do during quarantine? Like, right. I would say watch the corn grow, but I literally can. Like, there's a farm behind my house. It's not ours, but it's all corn right now. So,
hey, you know what? I had completely forgotten until you sent me your outline, right? So everybody knows when you come on to do a Saga episode, we do an outline with some bullet points to kind of keep us on point, right? So we get from the beginning to the end. But you mentioned on here that you had a motorcycle, and I had completely forgotten that we took the Fort Carson motorcycle, the driving thing, there on post when we came back off a deployment. Remember that? And you had just bought a motorcycle.
Not even, like, again, where the military like puts me in these situations. And the military didn't tell me how to ride a motorcycle, but
put you in these situations.
Yeah. So I had never ridden a motorcycle before. I had never driven a vehicle with a clutch before. And so I was like, this seems like a good idea. I'm going to sign up for this course. So you were already riding, right? You were just taking the course. The Army would let you ride on post, right? And speaking of soup sandwiches, I am so embarrassed when I think about that course because I must have stalled that bike like 50 times. I like fell over. Like, I was a mess. But made it through, figured out how to ride a motorcycle, got my shit together, bought a bike, and I rode. And so I rode between those between the two deployments. And then I was awesome, bought a cool new bike as soon as I got back in 2012. And then I was pregnant like 2 weeks later. So that kind of put a damper on things. Right. Still rode a little bit between pregnancies, and then it was like, all right, I'm not getting any use out of this. And so sold the bike a couple years ago and have not gotten back to it. My dad rides and he's here, so I would have someone to ride with, but I still just don't feel like I have the free time to take off, when you're not at work and you're parenting, raising a couple kids. And so.
Well, you know what? I hope I hope you get a chance to do that again. I know how it is on a motorcycle, especially being a veteran, being able to just get out there on the road and just feel a little bit what I call the freedom wind. Just kind of strip away some of that stuff and I get back to the controls of the bike and feeling the road and the engine and just kind of get centered with myself. I really hope you get a chance to get that back, here. Yeah. Once the kids get doing their own thing and go out there and ride with your dad, man. Talk about some amazing experiences. Jump on the back with him.
Yeah, I could. I mean, he's got, the Cadillac of Harleys. It's like a back seat back there. Right. Armrest, radio, cruise control.
That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey, Katie, I want to thank you for coming on. Been trying to get you on here for a while. Things just haven't worked out. Been really busy. And then, of course, I'd made the move and the virus and everything. But I want to thank you, not just for coming on, but, for the care that you took with the soldiers that you served with. I don't know how many were affected, but I know that there's 4 or 5 within my own sphere that I know were affected by the care that you took with them. So I want to thank you for that, and then for just being a great friend.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I mean? It's great out here knowing that you've got other veterans that are taking charge and trying to do the best they can out here. Your selfless service is very, very commendable, and I appreciate you.
Thanks.
I'm going to leave it to you to close out the episode, so you got the last word. Once again, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Well, I just want to tell veterans, have a great weekend, stay safe, check on your battle buddies, and reach out if you need anything. Not necessarily because you're in crisis, but you just, want a good word from someone you trust. Veterans across the country here are always willing to help each other out. So appreciate you, Chris, and what you're doing here, and hope you all have a good time.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon.
Hey, copyright, Heart of Volunteer, 2020.